What do you live for?
I live to remind the people of their practice. I live a demonstration so that they have a better idea how this practice can be conducted amongst other peeps, and particularly in the midst of all kinds of human situations and practical demands and requirements and pressures that, for the most part, control the lives of most people. So we're talking about having to live in a survival mode, but then with this demonstration, live in a separate but very, let's say, positive, even if it's neutral, condition that enables the life pattern to have some balance so that it's not all one way or just what your experience is, which is usually to be under pressure, to be, let's say, burned by the demand to perform, to work, to serve, to be subject to obligations and all kinds of other, let's say, karmic patterns that are agreed upon. So we're talking then understanding agreements, being in the karmic world, but not having to be the karmic world. And so this demonstration is about how to be in the world but not of it.
Who do you live for?
All beings is easy to say. Live for life. One can say they live for themselves, they live for their family. But we're part of the universe, so it's really difficult in the light of a realization to say you just live for a couple of peeps. You can be dedicated to a couple of peeps and make that very clear and use that as some kind of karmic bond between you and other peeps. But it's not beyond the point true, because you're living here to fulfill the needs of your body and your ancestry. You're living here as part of and in the graces of the river of blood. So you're living as an extension of the river of blood karma and its programming. In the light of being here, living for, let's say, river of blood or ancestral purposes, then we're also, relative to my function, here to live for mastery purposes, accomplishment purposes, for purposes of coming into some degree of penetration of the karma or delusions relative to being karma and all of this, and finding some light at the end of the tunnel. The light at the end of the tunnel would also be called peace. And so we're here to demonstrate and live in the presence of peace. And this is what I bring to the people. I live for those who are here to bring into their lives as much peace as possible. Not peace which slows you down and makes it difficult for you to do what you have to do. On the other hand, it's an exhilarative peace. It's a cleansing peace. It's like the peace of having taken a great shower, which shows up to be exactly what you needed in order to refresh yourself, to be able to go into fast forward if you have to go fast forward. Okay?
What is hue?
Hue is exhalation. Exhalation is release. Release is burn. Burn is good practice. And we're all here to, whether we like it or not, inhale and exhale. The idea is to do it with a certain degree of celebration and glorification. In this case, it is the recognition of hue. That means we are exhaling beings. That means we are self-releasing, self-regulating beings, which means that we're built to do that, but we don't do it to the degree that's necessary to be free of suffering. So we're not exhaling enough, we are not releasing enough, and so we become victimized by our own lack of understanding of how to breathe psychically and spiritually. So now, with demonstration of how to breathe spiritually, in this sense that all the bodies, including the physical actions, including emotional reactions and memories and mental patterns and thoughts and self-imagery and all the rest of that, all of that has to be released. See? And that's what the exhalation is for. It's the inhale, refreshment, and exhale everything that is standing in the way. So that when we inhale again, we are completely refreshed. And so we're talking about conscious breathing this is my purpose here, is to demonstrate this to the peeps in terms of enabling them to balance out their debts so that they can find more peace on the spot in this lifetime, and so on and so forth.
What are you here to do?
I'm here to be awake, and responsible as an awakening being and an awake being, in a sense, for sharing this, demonstrating this, speaking this to other peeps, see, living this and playing this to other peeps, see, sitting this to everybody, silencing this to everybody. So you have texting that people do. This is called silencing. See, being the silence and living this to one another so that there's more peace. See, that's the purpose. Peace is our foundation. See, peace is our true. See, peace is our heart state. Zero heart space is peace. See, peace is the best medicine, and peace is also the best food for each other. See, we need to be this peace so we can bring this peace, so we can share peace with one another, and then ultimately the world, and that goes beyond that, and really rings a tone for the galaxy, that we actually have a humanity, a family of beings that are resonant to the need for peace, or spiritual reality, or maybe even spiritual realization. Some would call it enlightenment. We call it ensoundment, but it's all the same thing. Heart to heart, fullness.
What is burn?
Burn is awakening. Release. Okay. Purificational effect. Okay. Productive of happiness. Waves of happiness and grace, graciousness. See? I won't say contentment as such, but balancement, definitely balancement, but it's also good to go, clear, see? Up and running, see? Ready to take a leap, see? Confident, see? Very jumpable, I would say, very workable, but this is very jumpable, see? This obstacle is very jumpable, see? That's the burn. It's about making things totally, having things completely jumpable.
What is God?
Traditionally, God refers to some kind of supreme being or overlord, superlord. But there's not enough, say, experience that we would say brings people to a common understanding. If this is the law, if this is the heart and the source, or the basic reality, then it's not working. Whatever it is has led people to think and believe and have faith in something that it doesn't really seem that it's standing up to itself, which means then God has to be called something else as the mystery, see, the who knows. God then is gone to madness, because it's not here, see. And it's not here because it is everything already. So God is everything. Because it's everything, is nothing in particular. It's the total. See? If it's the total, it's the simple. See? So it's the one, and then it's the no one. And as such, so we have to say God has gone to mad because it is no one and it is nothing in particular. It's the total, the isness of itself. Phew.
Is there such a thing as atheism?
Well, there's, I'd say there's a certain kind of idea about it, of course. Everyone knows that there are those who believe in the mystery, that means the non-existing, the mystery, there's something else, this incomprehensible something else. And then there are those who don't believe in that. So, I think when you get when you get beyond religion, and believing or not believing, and faith or not faith, when you get beyond that beginner's juncture, and I mean really beginning, that initial impulse to find out what's true, you reach a point where you see that belief itself is both the God and both the ungod, say the non-God, the God and the non-God. So it's the theism and then the atheism. So it's belief that it's the ignorance. Having to believe is ignorance. But knowing beyond that is good practice. See, having something to believe in is not enlightenment. I don't think that's what Jesus came to earth for, to have people follow him because of something to believe in. I think that according to this legend and the stories and the history, he came in to demonstrate what the life of practice is about. And that people must practice under the guidance of a living master, because that's what he did, that was the way. So if that's what his demonstration is, then he left that for other people to follow up on, which meant they had to find a living master. Because if he didn't have to come down in the flesh, then there could be a story about it. And then they'd say, well, God says this, God says that. And you would know. You'd have to believe it. Again, some man or woman said, God says this, God says that, and you'd have to believe that. See, far removed from your experience, far removed from your karma, far removed from your ancestry, far removed from yourself. You'd have to believe that. But since Jesus and other peeps of that caliber do show up on the planet, that means they assume the role of masters or leaders or practitioners, and sometimes they're more psychic than others, sometimes more philosophic than others, sometimes they're more crazy than others, and maybe others are even more creative than others. They nevertheless show up, and they show you, and demonstrate to you, and they confront you, and they put you through hell if they have to, or show you and reveal to you the wonders of heaven if they have to, as needed, depending on their function, depending on your capacity to understand that which is beyond belief, and in this case, in your face. See, so what's in your face should be beyond belief. So when we're talking about atheism and theism, we're talking about the luxury of having an opinion, a luxury of having a view, and too often it's a political view, like a basketball or a poison ball, used against what it seems that Jesus and his type came down here to do, which is to help you to open up your heart at a universal level and operate from there. Live from the heart as the heart, so that then you can understand words like, well, turn the other cheek, love your neighbors as yourself, and so on and so forth, which are idealistic sort of, let's say, wishes for some peeps, because they can never do that themselves. And so I don't think the masters come down here to give you something that's impossible. I think they come down here to show you the way it is. And because of your ignorance and your believing and not believing in yourself, or believing in this, that, whatever, your belief obstruction, then you need to break through, these things and get to the other side. That is the side of true understanding of the path, true understanding of the basis of the path, true understanding of the practice, the meditation on the path. That means transcension, getting above this world. And as Jesus said, what he's come to teach is not even from the next world, but from the world after that, and so on and so forth, which means it's got nothing to do with the human nature. So we can get that straight, that he was talking about heavens on top of heavens on top of heavens. That means the interdimensional consciousness. And that has to do with all of us. Then we might be able to get our feet on the path properly, and then start to get beyond our belief systems and our fears, because belief then is attached to fear. Belief then means that there's something else, there's something that has to be changed, there's something that could be better, and so on. That means that we're living in God's world of imperfection, and then you have to consider whether or not God is here to have made an imperfect world, or is it perfectly so, and it's up to the individuals to wake up to where that perfection is.
Are you a Christian?
Super Christian. Super Christian. So I'm not following in any particular school or belief system. See, working from the heart, living as the heart as much as that is humanly possible. That means in the world of universals, not dealing with ordinary peeps and their fears and their ignorance and their darknesses. Because there are many who wear crucifixes that only know darkness. And that's why they wear crucifixes, because all they know is darkness. And they know that that's all they know, and they have lots of fears. They fear the devil, they fear this, that, they fear themselves. See, in other words, they fear freedom, and they fear mastery of the time, space, energy, matter dimensions of the universe. They fear doing that because it's so demanding. They may as well just say, well, I'll just go to church, listen to a sermon by one of the priests, and feel that that is about as much wisdom as I can handle for the week. And that doesn't quite cut it. See? So, comment.
Are you a Buddhist?
Yes, super Buddhist. Yeah. Super Buddhist means person who has an understanding that thought creates your world. So your world is created out of thought. And so as you move through the body, you move through the emotions, you move through your memories, your unconscious, you move through your lower mental, your self-imagery, and you move through your say, inherited and ancestral thought patterns and the drives and the unconscious, this, that, and whatever that's coming through your body and your mind, all this machinery that's coming through that is you're supposed to work from, and you're supposed to use it as wood for the fire. Once you're able to put all that sort of aside, then you come to that recognition that everything is thought created and thought relative to who is thinking what and what it is that they're saying, meaning what and what it is that they're saying that could be interpreted as what. So thought is really the matrix for what happens and doesn't happen in the universe of human nature. And so in this case, yes, I understand that. I understand from Jesus you need a living master. I understand from the Buddhist that thought is the source, so you have to get beyond thought. See? So you have to work to your practice, that is. You have to practice to the point where you're able to confront your thought processes. And you have to go deep before you can get to that point where you're able to reprogram your mind, and that can be done by good practice, which is a form of reprogramming. So that what comes out of your mind via the unconscious is what makes you happy, what makes you feel very good, successful, complete, perfect, and so on and so forth. And so yes, I'm the super versions of these, according to what I feel, these two schools of thought or schools of practice have come to demonstrate for the peeps. See? Now, furthermore, in the sense of the Buddhist technology, which has to do with the unconscious accessing the superconscious or the peaceful, that certainly, and also let me also mention the non-political. See, so being outside of the field of politics, the God politics, the religious politics, and what we see in the world as being the problem, not the solution to humanity, is religious politics. Saying, my God is better than your God, my God is the real God, my God is this God, my God has this, my God does that, and if you do this, my God's going to strike you down, and my God's going to lift you up, and all of this sort of like Walt Disney, Hollywood sort of version of what God has been reduced to. The ego God, the God of egoic sort of values, and egoic operations, and egoic interest. All of that really reflects less what the God could be and what it is as a transcendent reality, and more what the humans are, the undeveloped and unenlightened humans are, that are wielding, using, and manipulating the conversation about God in form of religious politics against one another, and for self-interest, which means they've reduced God, the transcendent, to a form of materialistic, sort of like politics. So there's no evolution in that. There's no progression in that. And for sure, somebody like Jesus would have to come down with a big foot and kick some butt out there to set the people, his own people, or those that claim to be his people, straight. so that they can actually get on the path and start becoming good people. Now, certainly there are good Catholics and good Christians. There's no doubt about it. I've met many. And there are certainly good Buddhists and good people throughout the world. We're talking now about good people, regardless of their belief system. Good people, super people. Heart people are super people. And that's as much as I can say on that, so I can address any other questions you have. Super people, heart people.
Are you a yogi?
Yes, a yogi, and let's go to the word yoga means communion. And the implication is what you can use to attain communion with the deity or Godhead, peace, say, heaven. Say. And have I been to heaven? Do I know what heaven is? And this sort of thing. I've had experiences that are very typical in the psychic worlds of going to very beautiful places that you have to call heaven. Heaven is part of our makeup. See, it's not an imagined thought. It's a frequency. It's a wavelength. It's a state of consciousness that has to do with the upper frequencies, the higher frequencies of light and sound. This is understood by the spiritual scientists, not by believers and religious followers as such. They don't want to know that much. They don't want realization. They don't want to enter the fire of God. They don't want to have anything to do with that torture of having to confront the deity and God and speak before it and be exposed to what this divinity is and the power and the fire of what this presence is. They don't want to have anything to do with that. In fact, the reaction that most people have to what it is like, well, it's something which is demonic, see? And it isn't. The heart is not demonic. Okay? Egotism and ignorance are, in fact, what is demonic. That means avoiding the reality, avoiding the purificational fire of spirit. And so we have to get to that point where we understand what the spirit is, in this case, as a purificational fire, the burning bush, and not something you can believe in. No, it's terrifying, but it's not the devil. Your ego and your fear are the devil. See, this is the way it is. You must pass through the fires of life and death in order to get to what is true heaven, and so on. See? So it's part of the practice. So when we're talking about communion, you have to be willing to commune. That means engage in, penetrate, and go beyond the barriers and limits of your experience. You have to know what your self-limiting or limitational functioning is in terms of protecting yourself, and then you have to drop those layers of fear, insecurity, concern, doubt, division, and so on, so that you can get to a place where what is left is only light, pure, sheer light, pure, see, peace. What is true? In this case, it's through the burn, communion through the burn. Okay. That means instantaneous recognition, realization, and or intuitive understanding of what the heart nature is. Cut to the chase, go right to that. Because we are that, we're made of that, so our core level is that, despite our conditioning and our fears. And people who are dying get closer to that than ever before in their lives, because they are starting to recognize as the body dissolves that they are not the body, that they're returning to something more dynamic, more profound than that. They're leaving the body and the illusions and delusions of being the body, that's karma, and they're starting to sense that something else, something great, the great event is occurring. The light is starting to dawn. In some cases, they start to see it, they start to feel peace, they start to sense happiness and beauty and majesty, see, which has to do with the qualities of spirit, not the qualities of matter or the qualities of human ignorance, human anything. See, it's going beyond human consciousness. And so, yes, yoga means being in a state of ongoing communion, not just exercising the right to communion through certain techniques, but living in a state of divine communion and feeling at all times that you are with that, you are that, and you speak to it. It speaks through you to other peeps, to more or less stop, look, listen to the heart and recover your heart nature for real.
What is Ekankar?
Ek means one, oneness, maybe even total. Ankar means the vehicle. So Ekankar, coincidentally, means the one vehicle. And that is kind of like the great vehicle in a sense, which when you look at the Buddhists, they have the Mahayana, see, the great vehicle. And so there's a parallel there. They mean the same thing, and they're very similar, in fact, in having practiced most of these teachings as a practicing yogi earlier, and in fact including most teachings that I could get to during a certain phase of research and study and practice. They're very similar. Paul Chuecho did study Tsongkhapa's teachings. Tsongkhapa is the Grand Master who revealed a certain system which the Dalai Lama is the representative of. And so there is some of the Buddhist, I guess you might say, Dharma in Eckankar. And one of the more important things of Eckankar, which is not good for everybody, but certainly good for their purposes, is that they teach. And certainly when I was reviewing and participating in their mastery and mastership, they teach that the only valid chakra is the sixth chakra, the head chakra. That's the only valid chakra. The other chakras are valid. In other words, if you take care of the sixth chakra, it will take care of the rest of the chakras. You go to the sixth, it will take care of all of the other chakras, rather than start at the bottom chakra, the base chakra, the anal sphincter, and work your way up, which is the slow boat to Burma. They said, no, start from the top. And then this goes to what I was just saying, that in terms of divine communion, it's a state of isness already. So if you start there, if you put your thought or your mind or your focus on the reality itself, spirit or heartfulness itself, then that should spread out and permeate from there, permeate into all the other sort of lower chakras to infinity. See, that may be possible for some, but not necessarily possible for all people, because it requires a certain integration, a certain alignment, and a confluence of forces and karmas that would be considered somewhat miraculous and very hard to attain in order to create the actual conditions of recognizing that and then realizing that as well. Shu? Okay, question?
How are you recognized by the mastership of Eckankar?
The Eckankar system, which would appear to be like just another, let's say, path created by some very ambitious individual, and so on and so on, really descends from Kirpal Singh. Paul Churchill was related to the Kirpal Singh circle of peeps, and so he comes from those roots and those teachings, which go back to Paul, according to history anyway, his story goes back to his childhood. And so, in other words, they have a non-material, a certain spiritual world approach to it, which most peeps find to be inconceivable, that they would know things because of extrasensory faculties or whatever. Yes, they have access to understanding what peeps are, so for them to recognize me as something that they can do, because that's their work. It's to work with the subtle dimensions of consciousness where they know what's true and what's not true according to what their particular interest are. In this case, it's mastery, mastership, and people of a certain kind of intelligence and quality that they would consider to be valid in terms of mastery. And so they would screen and test in their own way. And so that's basically what it was in terms of having communication with some of these peeps. They were able to determine that I was part of their mastership, or someone who was functioning in line with their particular mastery and mastership and teachings and realizations. So that's how that came about. And I talked to peeps and wound up with the leader who addressed me personally, and so on and so forth, and sort of made some things clear. And so was it something which I would say they would be psychic and spiritual and know things that you're not supposed to know, but they can know things? I'd have to say yes. Would they then be what I would call showing up as participants in a spiritual mastership? I would say definitely, yes. I can't prove that to anybody else, but I would say so. And I've met a lot of different practitioners from different institutions and different ideas and walks of life, different traditions, and I would say that the experience I had with the Eckankar people is pretty unique. Not better, just its own thing, because that's their specialty. Or was at that time. I can't speak for anybody today. I can only speak to the issue that I met people, met the master, the head master who recognized me as the master. That's it. Just not much to say about it. It's not something you can talk about and explain. It's not that it's secret or whatever. It's beyond the realm of comprehension. So, any other comments?
What does self-realization mean?
In terms of what?
Does the self in self-realization have anything to do with ego?
No. Self-realization is not self-realization in that case. Self-realization means no self-realization, and so it is really about no self-realization. Heart realization is really what self-realization, I think, is supposed to refer to. It has nothing to do with the ego whatsoever, but it's called a self because it means it arises of itself. It sort of emerges, it erupts by itself. It just comes up, it just happens. See, it's kind of like out of nowhere without invitation, and sort of it's like an embarrassing visitor that comes in, comes barging through your door. You have to deal with, how'd you get here? And say, why are you here? And so on. And so that's what happens from within the consciousness into the human consciousness. You have this breakthrough, and there's not very much anyone can do about it. It makes itself known, and that's it. It just is what it is. And so self-realization then means there's some recognition of the created basis of the universe, and so it is part of our intelligence functioning. We have to get to that. We have to recover that in each individual's case, and that takes a lot of purification often, and sometimes it takes no purification in an obvious sense, and it just takes certain adjustments, changes, or shocks can bring it about, or sometimes it just happens and you might just be doing nothing and it could occur, and then after that everybody knows there's a change. You may look the same, but everyone knows there's a fundamental change because your intelligence has shifted from a certain fear base of understanding to a fearless basis of understanding, a heart base, and you feel basically open and one with all peeps. You understand differences, but you're more inclined to heal differences because you understand the more commonality, the realization that we're all heart beings, and we need to operate from a resonance that enables us to be exactly that and only that. And so then the work and the teachings are usually, and the message is really at a universal level. And so it becomes obvious to those who are resonant with that. When they read someone's work, they can say, this is a self-realized being, and therefore they're creating their own path, but it's not out of ego. It's because that's the way it works. It works that way. It will use your karma and illuminate your universe and make you source, because what you realize in self-realization is that you and the God or source as such, cause or causelessness, are the same thing. Sure. A good question would be, if you actually experience something like the kingdom within, or the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of spirit, is it possible to be an asshole? I'd say no. And that's a very, very difficult thing to say. Yeah. Yeah. And that's because the reality of what that is so profound. Like burns a lot out of you just to be there, just to see it, just to the experience itself is purificational. And of course you can be the same person, you can be in the same body, but something is different, something has changed after that. We're not talking about a fantasy, we're talking about a mind-altering, life-altering experience of realization, real experience. So you don't recover from it, it changes you forever. That to me is a question, very good question. See? And so the people who are out there, who are Buddhists or Christians, who remain to be assholes, see, and they are proud of their assholeness and being themselves and egomaniacally so, have no clue as to what the heaven is or what the God is or what anything like their master would be like. They have no clue of what that demand is and what that fire, what that burn is, what that force is. They have no idea what that creative force is and how it demands that you radically confront and release yourself from every form of falseness, see. BS. That you're suffering. And that's what people suffer, is BS. Nonsense, garbage. And being identified with it, being victimized by it, self-victimized by it, being controlled by it. So I just recognize what it is and step out of it so that you can recover your heavenly reality and then be with the God of pure spirit. And thus as a heart being, not as a demonic being, right? Which too many Christians are already that. See? With their love of war and love of weapons and love of doing everything Jesus would even imagine doing and already made very clear, turn the other cheek. He didn't say pick up your arms and grab a sword and use a sword. See, that never occurred. See? And that's because there was something fundamentally real about what he was saying that was timeless. That what was true at that point is also could be true now. See, so as a humble worker of spirit, touched by the force and light of spirit, whether you consider him the Son of God or the Son of Od or whatever it is, see, the Son of Oz, anybody's son, is irrelevant. It's a matter of what you're willing to do to be that yourself. How are you being that instead of just conveniently following an interpretation of what that is? See? We need to know what that is. So real practitioners get to the core of this. They don't want to hear about interpretations. They want to know what it is. So in my case, on that basis, and being an extreme Catholic, in a sense, saying, well, if Jesus did that, I think I should do that. So I fasted for 40 days a number of times, liquid fast. I didn't do it without water. I went the weaker approach. I took the lower road in this case, and just to see what it was. And what it does is it brings you close to death and dying, and how it feels to be without a body or care very little about the body and food and the material condition. So that's good practice. That's part of the monastic practice and part of the Christian path of fasting. Not so much to the 40-day level, but at least fasting somewhat. Not one day. One day's not going to do anything for you. 7 days, I think that starts to show you what the meltdown is and what the dematerialization or the re-spiritualization is about once you get to 7 days and beyond that, without any food. And I think you're starting to get a sense of what practice is about and what resonance is with beyond the material or the gross level of, let's say, vital instincts, the gross level of bad habits, where your dog is doing the eating and the let's say, the demanding of what your dietary requirements are. Say, the dog is in charge. And here we're talking about getting the spirit, the will, the soul back up and running so that, more so than the dog, which is the dog begging to be trained, by the way, is ruling. The spirit must rule the flesh. See? And then you are in harmony, you are doing the right thing. And so we need to clarify that and further define that for certain peeps. And so these things were proven to me, and what happened in my case, since I came in as an awakened sound being, starting from infancy with the drums and staying there. And it wasn't just about drums, it was what I was hearing and feeling and what was happening to me psychically that I say was unusual, peculiar, and unique to what I was doing, at least according to who I talked to, certainly my Aunt Gracie and others who are, let's say, adepts of the field of psychic phenomena, being Edgar Cayceans. They had a good sense of what was going on in that realm of things. And so getting back to the music, it wasn't about the music as such that you can hear, but the vibrations from which music comes from that have to do with dematerialization, that have to do with levitation. And so this is where I started to formulate and put together my understanding as I became educated and more cultured in the ways of the world and their religious practices or native practices. I started to see that where I was coming from the get-go was the way, was the force, was my recognition of what it is for me, and what it is for many peeps. If it is that way for me, it's true for me, it's true for others. The idea is to find the others for whom it is as true, and then those would be the peeps who I would call the friends. Sometimes those happen to be jazz musicians. We have a very similar, very comparable understanding of what it is, and so it's easy for us to play in the way that I need to play. See, in this regard, it's the heart fire sound concept, which means the music's not coming from your culturing, it's not coming from what you think is music, and not from what you've heard. But then it's a matter of using what you've heard as wood for the fire of what you've never heard, and what you've never felt, and what you've never done, and in that case, continually peeling the onion to the infinite, so that every time one plays, one is completely renewed and done, toasted by the process, by the burn of the sound. In this case, it's the heart fire level of sound, which has nothing to do with thought. It's nothing to do with emotions. But it is those things, but at the purest level that is imaginable. Comment on that, a question?
Can you talk more about fasting?
Well, fasting happens on different levels. You can fast physically, deprive yourself. I think fasting means abstaining. So you have to mentally fast. You have to fast on all the levels. Physically, emotionally, you have to more or less apply some cessation, some kind of balance to your emotional problems, emotional issues, and all this unfinished business that runs your life, because it's stuff that keeps recirculating, recycling, so that it can be confronted and dealt with and more or less put to rest. So everything that arises arises so that sooner than later it is put to rest. And it's the business before you. When you have suffering, when you have karma, when you have issues, when you have feelings and all of this, all of that is not you. None of the phenomena that arises is you. Emotions mean that you have stuff to deal with on the astral level, and that may also include the memory level. Memory. If we're talking astral emotions, past emotions, and in some cases the peeps who have these feelings and emotions don't know why they still have these feelings and emotions. That's because they're not processing them well enough, properly, and they're not recognizing where they come from, because they have nothing to do with their self. But since it's in their body and arising in their consciousness, they interpret that as, well, it's all about me because this is what I'm experiencing. Not! See, it's what you have to get free of, what you have to discharge for yourself, what you have to purify for yourself, what you have to recognize as part of your stream, your ancestry. It has to do with your mother and your father and their mothers and fathers ad infinitum. It has to do with the line you come from, and the blood that you have circulating in your system, which is not yours, it's yours to use, and then yours to pick up like the body and then put down like you have to do with the body. You got to put it down so you can move on to higher, better, greater, and more spiritual other things, we hope. See? So fasting then means abstaining, recognizing and releasing yourself from identification with a certain plane of consciousness. It's that simple, it's that direct, that immediate, and that devastating. In other words, everything that shows up in you is not you, but you're believing it's you because it's showing up in you. It's like a film. See, that's like seeing a movie on the wall, and then you're saying that's you because it's in your face, it's in your perception, and you can't differentiate the fact that it's not you, but it's something that you're looking at, that you're supposed to see but not believe is you. See. So when we're talking fasting again, mental fasting may be considered the highest form of fasting, because if we go back to the Buddhist technology where thought creates world, thought equals world, see, and we're talking about the power of thought to create and obstruct and destroy at the same time, then we're talking about self-imagery. What you believe to be true for you, or true as you. In this case, nothing of it is true of anybody, but it is what it is. It's phenomena that you agree to because you're born into that particular family, and so you have this relationship to it. I'm not sure you have an obligation to it, but you are the obligation that your body represents. You're living, so you have an obligation because of being alive here, incarnate, to maintain that. as much as your survival instincts and your drive to live and do and be and or become enable you or sustain you to perform or to complete, depending on what you understand you're here to do. So we have to use what arises and not be used by what arises in our minds. And so when we're talking about practice then, is how do you abstain from mental? You chant. You come back to the most vital of all the techniques and all the practices throughout the world. You start to become aware of your breathing, mindful of your breathing. You start to slow yourself down, bring yourself to a flat stop. Nothing happening. You can only do that for a few moments, but those few moments are precious. So you create starting points. You create profound moments of remembrance. See, sweet remembrance. That despite all of the theater of your life, you are none of it, yet you are all of it at the same time. So you have a paradox to deal with. You are, but you are not. You are suffering, but you are not suffering. At what level are you not suffering? It's not about, well, there is no suffering. No, there is suffering, but at what level are you able to be that suffering and yet not be that suffering? See? So we're talking about then functioning in dual mode, which has to do with understanding parallel realities and working with a paradox. This is where the teachings come in. So that you're able to create a bridge to a more peaceful existence because of your suffering, because of your identification, your programmed identification with all the phenomena, that is your emotions, your body, your dysfunctionality, your dysfunctional memory, your dysfunctional mentality, your dysfunctional emotions. All of that stuff shows up as wood for the fire of practice so that you start to flatten all of that out to the stop point. That's what practice is about. That's what the hue is about. Bringing everything to the burn means zero. Heart space. No one else has anything to do with it. Nothing else has anything to do with that. Just boom. Already done, already stopped, already gone. All the stuff is already gone. And it's not. That's good practice. That's nowness practice. Yeah. Comment?
And would the same apply to dreams, thoughts?
All of it. Each plane is a stream. Each stream is like a river in the cosmic universe, ocean. So, the beauty of having a body is that there is already this containment. There is relative containment. So you have about as much as you can handle. Some people have certain channels open a little bit too much, and then they have to learn how to close those channels so much so that they establish a balance. Too much emotion, turn it down. Or recognize the futility of it, or be at another level. Be at its source. Be at the source of emotion, which is no emotion. Peace. So then there is no emotion, there is no ego, there is no self, there is no world, there is nothing but spirit. And then that's the language used. The spiritual realization means coming to terms with emptiness, radiance, fullness. See? Liberation. Which means no problems, no problemas. Yeah. And to the degree that a person can ritually, periodically, return to this kind of hueness, right? The beauty of hueness, the grace of hueness, that means happy breathing, releasing and remembering true nature, hue nature. Yeah. And to that degree you start to build that karma, and then that starts to show up in your programming over time. And you start to just feel that shows up by itself and starts to come up by itself. And then that becomes your reality, because you're being creative and thus recreative, and using a principle of layering that makes former layers less present, less powerful, and older layers recede into oblivion, and they can do that. Okay. They can be, let's say, chanted out, completely chanted out, because the power is in what you do now, that is then used as part of your amplification of how the next moment's going to be. this is affecting the next moment. So being true to this moment creatively, in terms of sitting, practicing, which is what the beauty and the benefit of sitting meditation is about, brings this gap, this space of zero heart space that starts to not so much dominate, but just arise more of itself. And you have more of a smiling face because this process enables you to say goodbye to the suffering face, the face of misery, the face of unhappiness. See, and here there's neither happiness nor unhappiness, which means then you have much more clearance to be genuinely happy, true happiness, free of happiness and unhappiness, true happiness. Good practice. Come in.
And so then, is it more a matter of focusing on practice and chanting rather than focusing on weeding out the negative, but
Yes.
focusing on practice so everything else?
At one point, you need to look at what the negative is. Otherwise, it goes beyond notice. See? You have to know what the machinery is. When you take a look at what the problem might be in a car, you have to look at everything. Everything has to be considered. So you have a more comprehensive diagnostic approach to, let's say, the operational functioning of a vehicle. That's like your mind. Your mind. Completely that. Your mind is that. Like a computer. Completely that. Your mind is all the things that come through the mind. Your mind is that. These are manifestations of the mind. So then that means the mind is exactly like that. It's a machine. It's part of it. It's organic, no doubt, but it's productive of the strangest mechanical things because the mind gives birth to it. That means the mechanical is a part of the organicness of the whole thing, which is a paradox. See? The mind is steel. The mind is titanium. The mind is aluminum. It's all of these things. Mind is everything and nothing because it's the source of it. See? Intelligence, going back to thought. Buddhist, Buddha, thought, pure thought, original thought, first thought, true thought, so on. No thought, exactly.
So the mind is everything that it perceives?
The mind is beyond what it perceives. The mind is everything coming through it, but it's also what witnesses it is all the same. It sees itself. So the divine is that which infinitely sees itself for better and for worse. Depending on what filters and what fear programs you have, then that is the divine in you. It's a paranoia or ecstatic bliss. Depends on what your state is and what you've cleared, what you have made yourself transparent to. Then you have what could be called, to some degree or other, self-recognition or self-liberation or self-transcending. Let's say awareness itself. Awareness. So as we sit here, we know that we're just basically awareness, breathing beings that are awake in the moment, and we need to extend that. This is a good gap, a stop point. We need to extend this for the sake of all beings, especially our kids, see, and others whose minds are not designed to create this or conceive of this. They don't have the karma of space yet. They only refer to and know about the karma of time. Cow. So we have to recover our true space beingness, and as a result of understanding the urgency of that, I wrote Zero Heart Space for those people that have a better sense of space than they do of themselves as time. Love always, Hugh.